Throughout history, women have had to fight to prove that anything men can do, they can do just as well, if not better. For centuries, women have commanded armies, fought bravely, and often straight-up dominated their enemies in combat. These are the legendary female warriors who changed the course of history. History often remembers the kings, the conquerors, and the crowned men who commanded armies. But beneath the surface, hidden in the folds of time, are the stories of women who defied convention and took destiny by the throat. These were no mere queens in castles. They were warriors, strategists, revolutionaries. They picked up the sword when no one else dared. They fought not just against armies, but against centuries of silence. This is not just history, this is her story. These are the legendary female warriors who changed the world. 1. Boudica, the warrior queen of vengeance. In the misty lands of ancient Britannia, a queen once rose, not from power, but from fury. Her name was Boudica, ruler of the Iceni tribe. After her husband died, the Roman Empire stripped her of her land, flogged her, and brutally assaulted her daughters. Rome expected silence. What they got was vengeance. Boudica united tribes long at odds, leading an army tens of thousands strong. They marched through Roman towns with one mission: burn it all. Londinium, the Roman jewel of Britain, was reduced to ash. Though she was ultimately defeated, her rebellion shook the empire to its core, and she became a legend of resistance. The year was 60 AD, and the Roman occupation of Britain had reached a boiling point. Boudica, with her fiery red hair and piercing gaze, stood before her people, her voice carrying across the wind-swept hills. "They have taken our lands, our dignity, and our freedom," she cried, "but they cannot take our spirit." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of the Britons. Farmers became warriors, housewives became strategists. The Iceni, once a small tribe, now led a coalition that stretched across the island. Roman settlers, caught off guard by the sudden uprising, fled in terror. As Boudica's army advanced, they left a trail of destruction in their wake. Camilla Dunum, modern-day Colchester, was the first to fall. The Roman temple, a symbol of imperial might, crumbled under the onslaught of Celtic fury. Survivors spoke of a woman with eyes that blazed like the fire she set, leading the charge on a chariot with blades on its wheels. But it was in Londinium that Boudica truly made her mark. The bustling Roman trading port, filled with merchants and soldiers, never stood a chance. As the rebels approached, the sky turned black with smoke. Buildings collapsed, screams filled the air, and the Thames ran red with blood. She had no army, until Rome gave her one, whispered the survivors. Boudica's forces, fueled by rage and a thirst for justice, seemed unstoppable. They moved like a storm across the landscape, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. Yet, as with all storms, Boudica's fury eventually met its match. The Roman governor, Suetonius Paulinus, gathered his legions for a final stand. On a narrow field, with dense forests at their backs, the two armies faced each other. Boudica, her face painted with blue woad, her hair wild in the wind, rode before her troops. "I am not fighting for my kingdom and my wealth," she declared. "I am fighting as an ordinary person for my lost freedom, my bruised body, and my outraged daughters." The battle that followed was a clash of titans. Celtic warriors, screaming war cries, charged against the disciplined Roman lines. For hours, the field ran with blood and echoed with the clash of steel. But in the end, Roman tactics prevailed over Celtic passion. As the sun set on that fateful day, Boudica's rebellion came to an end. Some say she took poison rather than face capture. Others claim she escaped into legend, living on in the hearts of her people. Though defeated, Boudica's impact on history was indelible. She had shaken the mighty Roman Empire to its core, proving that even the most powerful could be brought low by the fury of the oppressed. Her story became a rallying cry for generations of Britons, a reminder of their indomitable spirit. In the centuries that followed, Boudica's legend only grew. She became a symbol of British resistance, her name invoked in times of national crisis. Poets wrote of her courage, artists captured her fierce beauty, and historians debated the true extent of her achievements. Today, as we look back on Boudica's rebellion, we see more than just a tale of vengeance. We see a woman who dared to challenge the mightiest empire the world had ever known. We see a leader who united disparate tribes under a common cause. And we see a warrior who proved that the fire of freedom burns in all hearts, regardless of gender. Boudica's story reminds us that history is not just made by emperors and generals, but by those who dare to stand against injustice. In the face of overwhelming odds, she chose to fight. And in doing so, she carved her name into the annals of history, a testament to the power of one woman's will. 2. Tomoe Gozen, the blade in a kimono. Feudal Japan, late 12th century. Imagine a world where cherry blossoms fall like pink snow, and the wind whispers tales of honor and bravery. This is feudal Japan, a time when samurai ruled the land, and their swords sang a song of courage and duty. But amidst this sea of stoic warriors, there was one who stood out. Not just because of her skills with a blade, but because of the very fact that she was a woman in a man's world. Her name was Tomoe Gozen, and she was more than just a warrior. In the land of the rising sun, where the sword was sacred and the warrior's code held supreme, few dared question the traditions that bound them. Fewer still embodied its spirit, like Tomoe Gozen, a name whispered with reverence and awe. The year was 1185, and the Taira and Minamoto clans were locked in a desperate struggle for control of Japan. It was a time of chaos and bloodshed known as the Genpei War, a war that would decide the fate of Japan and the very essence of the samurai. Amidst this turmoil, Tomoe Gozen, a rare Anabugeisha, or female warrior, emerged as a beacon of skill and valor. She wasn't just a fighter, she was a leader, a commander whose strategic mind and martial prowess turned the tide of battles. Her story isn't just about strength, though. It's about breaking barriers, defying expectations, and proving that courage knows no gender. As the war raged on, legends began to sprout like weeds in a warrior's wake. They say she once faced down a veteran warrior in single combat, his head rolling down the beach after she beheaded him. Another tale speaks of her leading 300 soldiers against an overwhelming 2,000, emerging victorious. These aren't just stories, they're testaments to her skill and daring. Her name echoes through time, a melody of bravery that continues to inspire. Even after her story faded into folklore, her name remained, carved into the soul of samurai legend. But what truly made Tomoe Gozen a legend? Was it her strategic brilliance, her ability to lead and inspire, or was it her unparalleled skill in the art of war? Perhaps it was a combination of all these, a lethal blend that made her a force to be reckoned with. Tomoe Gozen was more than a warrior. She was a symbol of the strength and determination that lay within every woman, a spirit that transcended the boundaries of time. She showed that a woman could be more than just a delicate flower. She could be a warrior, a leader, a force of nature. As the cherry blossoms fell around her, painting the ground in shades of pink, she stood tall, a warrior in a man's world, a testament to the strength and spirit of women everywhere. To her foes, she wasn't a woman, she was war itself. Joan of Arc, the girl who spoke to angels. Joan of Arc is proof that you don't need years of combat training to be a total badass. She was just a peasant girl from a village in northeastern France. But in 1429, at the age of 17, she would become the maid of a legendary figure in French history. It was the 15th century, and France was in the grip of the 100 Years' War. English armies were terrorizing French villages, burning and pillaging their way across the countryside. Gothic cathedrals stood as silent witnesses to the chaos, while knights in shining armor clashed on blood-soaked battlefields. In the midst of this turmoil, a teenage girl gripped a banner and claimed to hear the voice of God. At a time when France was crumbling under English occupation, this 17-year-old peasant girl would change everything. Her name was Joan of Arc. Joan had no military training, no noble lineage, nothing that would typically qualify her to lead armies. But she had something far more powerful, an unshakable faith and a burning conviction. She believed that God had chosen her to save France, and she was determined to fulfill that mission, with nothing but her unwavering belief and fierce determination. Joan convinced the future King Charles VII to let her lead his armies. It was an unprecedented move, a teenage girl commanding seasoned soldiers. But Joan wasn't just any girl. At a city that had been under siege for months, Joan shattered the stalemate. Men and women of all ages, inspired by her courage, grabbed whatever weapons they could find: swords, axes, even kitchen knives, to join the fight. Just as the townspeople were giving up hope, Joan raised her banner and charged into battle, inspiring everyone to keep fighting. She wore armor, rode at the front of the army, and fought for a vision greater than herself. Joan didn't carry a sword to kill, she carried it to prove she was chosen. Her presence on the battlefield was electrifying, turning the tide of battles that had seemed hopeless. Under Joan's leadership, the French forces held off the English army for months, until they finally reached. The king rewarded Joan for her bravery, and her legend began to grow. Towns across France held parades in her honor, celebrating the girl who had brought hope back to a nation on the brink of defeat. But the world of medieval politics was crueler than any sword. Despite her victories, Joan found herself betrayed by those she had fought to protect. She was captured by her enemies and put on trial for heresy. The same passion and conviction that had made her a hero now made her a target. Condemned by a corrupt court, Joan faced her final battle alone. At the age of 19, she was burned at the stake, accused of being a heretic and a witch. As the flames rose around her, Joan remained defiant, her faith unshaken to the very end. But Joan's story didn't end with her death. In fact, it was only the beginning. In death, she became more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Joan of Arc transformed into a saint, a symbol, and a martyr whose flame has never been extinguished. Centuries later, Joan's legacy continues to inspire. She stands as a testament to the power of conviction, the strength of faith, and the ability of a single individual to change the course of history. From a simple peasant girl to a national hero, Joan of Arc's journey reminds us that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. In the end, Joan of Arc wasn't just a warrior or a leader. He was a beacon of hope in dark times, a voice for the voiceless, and a symbol of resistance against oppression. Her story teaches us that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a sword or a cannon, but the unbreakable spirit of a person who believes in something greater than themselves. So the next time you think you're too young, too inexperienced, or too ordinary to make a difference, remember Joan of Arc. Remember the girl who spoke to angels and led armies. Remember that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes come from the most ordinary beginnings. And remember that with faith, courage, and determination, even the impossible becomes possible. Queen Nzinga, the negotiator with a dagger. Queen Nzinga is proof that you don't need royal blood to be a total badass. She was just a princess in Angola, but in the 17th century, at the age of 40, she would become the fierce ruler of Nzinga, and the Atlantic slave trade was tearing Africa apart, and the Portuguese were terrorizing villages across the continent. Angola was next. Men and women of all ages grabbed whatever they had: spears, shields, and arrows, to defend themselves against the invaders. Just as the people were giving up hope, Nzinga stepped up to negotiate with the Portuguese. When they denied her a seat at the table, she didn't back down. Instead, she ordered one of her servants to get on all fours, creating a human chair. She sat on his back, meeting the Portuguese officials at eye level. This bold move was just the beginning. Nzinga wasn't just fighting wars, she was playing empires like chess. She converted to Christianity, not out of faith, but as a political strategy to gain leverage. She formed alliances with the Dutch, turning Portugal's European rivals against them in Africa. And when diplomacy failed, she didn't hesitate to pick up a weapon herself. For over 40 years, Nzinga resisted colonization with fire and brilliance. She led armies well into her 60s, inspiring her people to keep fighting against overwhelming odds. The Portuguese had superior weapons and vast resources, but Nzinga had something they couldn't match: an unbreakable spirit and a deep connection to her land and people. Her tactics were as diverse as they were effective. One day, she'd be at the negotiating table, using her sharp wit and political savvy to outmaneuver her opponents. The next, she'd be on the battlefield, leading her troops with a ferocity that struck fear into the hearts of her enemies. She understood that in this fight for survival, every tool had to be used. Nzinga's reign wasn't just about resistance, it was about vision. She saw beyond the immediate conflict, working to strengthen her kingdoms and preserve her people's way of life. She welcomed runaway slaves and European deserters into her army, creating a force united not by birth but by a common cause. This multicultural force became a symbol of resistance against European domination. The Queen's influence extended far beyond the battlefield. She was a skilled diplomat, forging alliances with neighboring kingdoms and even distant powers. She sent ambassadors as far as the Netherlands, seeking support in her struggle against the Portuguese. Her political acumen was so renowned that even her enemies couldn't help but admire her. But Nzinga's story isn't just about her achievements, it's about the legacy she left behind. For generations after her death, she remained a symbol of African resistance and female empowerment. Her name became synonymous with courage, wisdom, and unwavering determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Today, Queen Nzinga is remembered not just in Angola, but across Africa and around the world. Statues stand in her honor, books tell her story, and her name is invoked by those fighting for justice and equality. She showed that true power comes not from titles or weapons, but from the strength of one's convictions and the ability to inspire others. In a world where history is often written by the victors, Nzinga's story reminds us of the countless untold tales of resistance and resilience. She stands as a testament to the power of leadership, the importance of diplomacy, and the unbreakable spirit of those fighting for their freedom and dignity. Queen Nzinga didn't just fight wars, she reshaped the political landscape of 17th century Africa. Her life serves as an inspiration, showing that with courage, intelligence, and determination, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. In the face of European colonization, she didn't just survive, she thrived, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire to this day. Rani Lakshmibai, the Flame of India. Well, if you're a history buff, then you probably know her as the legendary Indian queen who fought against the British East India Company. If not, let me introduce you to the woman who is called the Flame of India. Welcome to the Legend of the Week series, where we tell you the inspiring stories of some of the most legendary people from Indian history. And today, we will be talking about Rani Lakshmibai. The year is 1857 and the British rule is expanding into the heart of India. They've taken over the old Mughal territories and now they're setting their sights on the small princely state of The new ruler of Jhansi, the young widowed Rani, refuses to bend before them. Soon the whole of India will erupt in the First War of Independence against the British. And when it does, she will ride at its front, waving the flag of revolt. This is the incredible story of Rani Lakshmibai, a warrior queen. Our story begins in the year 1835. The small kingdom of Jhansi was being ruled by King Gangadhar. He was a brave and benevolent king, loved by his people, but he had no sons. And so when he passed away, his wife, the Rani, took over the rule, much to the chagrin of the British. You see, the British policy at the time did not recognize women on the throne. They wanted to install a puppet ruler in Jhansi, someone who would do their bidding. The young Rani was not someone who could be intimidated, though. With the support of her people, she held her ground. For a few years, the British backed off, but in 1856, they came back with a new ruler for Jin, a distant cousin of the late king, completely under their thumb. This man was Raja Rao, and as soon as he stepped into Jhansi, he began making changes according to the British dictates. The Rani was not a silent spectator, though. She watched as the British and their Indian allies looted and pillaged her kingdom. She saw how they maltreated her people, how they forced the peasants to leave their homes and take up arms. She knew she had to do something to stop them. When news broke out that nearby states were revolting against the British, she knew it was time for action. In 1857, the rebellion reached Jhansi. The Rani and her adopted son Damodar Rao decided to flee to the nearby hill fort of Ellora, but they were ambushed. The Rani managed to escape, but the young prince was taken hostage by the British. Furious with the Rani, they imprisoned her in Fort Ali. But the Rani was not someone who could be kept behind bars for long. As the war raged on, she escaped from the fort and disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, the war was going poorly for the rebels. Most of the kingdoms had fallen and the British were now marching towards Jhansi. The Rani knew she had to do something big to turn the tide of the war, and that's exactly what she did. She raised an army of women, children, and peasants. She gave them arms and training and soon had an army of 3,000 men, 2,000 women ready to fight. When the British troops arrived at Jhansi, they found the city deserted. Though Rani had tricked them, she had fled with her loyal troops to the hills. From there, she launched a guerrilla attack on the British, targeting supply lines and communication networks. The British were furious. They combed through the forests, trying to find the elusive Rani, but she was nowhere to be found. Finally, the British got wind of the fact that she had taken shelter in the town of Gozen, and so in 1858 they attacked the town. The Rani and her adopted son were prepared this time. They fought bravely, but the British were too strong. Soon, the Rani's forces began to fall apart. The British entered the town and the Rani and her son were forced to flee once again. They rode out of the city on the back of an elephant with the British close behind. The Rani knew she couldn't outrun them forever. So when they reached a clearing, she stopped. She handed her son over to her companions and picked up 2 swords, one in each hand. She fought like a tigress, but was finally shot by a British soldier. As she fell from the elephant, her gallant son, who had been watching the entire battle from atop the elephant, rushed to her side. The end of the Rani's life was as heroic as her journey through the war. As the legend goes, she died on the battlefield, surrounded by her enemies, but refusing to surrender. Thus died Rani Lakshmibai, Queen of Jhansi, the Flame of India, who lived to be just 25. She was born a queen, but she died a warrior. Lozen, the Apache warrior prophetess. The wind whispers across the barren mesa, carrying tales of a people. The Apaches, who once roamed free in these lands. Their world is a harsh one, a sun-scorched desert of deep canyons and treacherous mesas where survival is a daily victory, and yet it is here, in this unforgiving landscape, their spirit soared. In the twilight of the Apache people's freedom, one woman stood beside the legendary Geronimo. Her name was Lozen, the Apache warrior. She was a healer, a warrior, and a prophet, a woman who could sense the movements of the enemy through prayer. As the U.S. cavalry thundered across the desert, their guns bellowing like hungry wolves, Lozen and Geronimo led their people in a desperate fight for survival. She rode a powerful horse into battle, her long, dark braids flying behind her like banners of defiance. In one hand, she held a rifle, its barrel smoking with the fires of resistance. In the other, she held the spirits of her ancestors, drawing strength from the wisdom of the old ways. Her people, the Chiricahua Apaches, were renowned for their fierce independence and unbreakable spirit, but even the bravest warriors knew the odds were against them. As the cavalry closed in, their leader, General Crook, offered them a choice: surrender and live, or resist and die. But for Lozen and many others, surrender was not an option. So as the sun set over the horizon, they prepared for one last stand. All around them, the desert echoed with the sounds of war drums, the rhythmic beating calling on the spirits of the earth to aid them in their struggle. Under the cloak of darkness, they made their move, disappearing into the labyrinthine canyons that the cavalry could not navigate. Throughout the night, they traveled, guided by the stars and led by Lozen's unwavering spirit. They evaded their pursuers, striking back when the opportunity arose. Lozen, with her keen senses and knowledge of the land, led her people across the harsh desert, always staying one step ahead of the cavalry. She helped the women and children escape while the men fought back, buying them time. Days turned into weeks, and the Apaches, though weakened and exhausted, refused to give up. Lozen's courage and determination inspired them to keep going, to keep fighting for their freedom. She was a beacon of hope in a sea of despair, a warrior priestess who fought not only with weapons but with the spiritual power of her people. Even the enemy marveled at her bravery and skill. One cavalryman, Private Thomas B. McClintock, wrote in his diary, "The Indians fought like demons. Their chief was a woman. She fought like a man and was as good a shot as any of our soldiers." But eventually, Geronimo and his followers were captured and imprisoned. Lozen died in 1864, her life force spent in the relentless struggle for survival. Her body was laid to rest in the cold New Mexico soil, but her spirit lived on, whispering through the wind across the mesas, urging her people to keep their heads high. Today, few know her name. The history books tell little of her story, but among her people, she remains revered as a symbol of courage, strength, and unbending spirit. In the annals of the Apache tribe, she is remembered as the woman who fought with the fire of her ancestors and the wisdom of the gods. Legacy of the Forgotten Warriors. They came from different lands, centuries apart, bound by no creed but courage. What they shared was defiance. In a world that told them to stay silent, stay home, stay small, they said no. And history listened. These women were warriors, not because they fought, but because they refused to kneel. And their names, though once buried, rise again. Some were queens, some were wives, some led armies, some stirred the pot, some were mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, but all of them were catalysts. Each in her own way shifted the world forward, cracking open the gates of what was thought possible. This is a story about them, the forgotten warriors, the ones whose statues don't crumble in the plazas and parks. Their faces aren't on coins or stamps or bank. You won't find their names carved in stone on any building or monument, but their deeds reverberate through time, echoing still today. They lived in times when women were supposed to be silent, when they were told to stay in the domestic sphere, to keep their heads down, their mouths shut, their eyes on the home front. But these women had something to say, they just did. It wasn't always pretty, sometimes it was messy, inconvenient, dangerous, even, but they did it anyway. These are just a few of the countless forgotten warriors whose stories need to be remembered. They fought for causes they believed in, for their people, for their freedom, for their dignity. So let their stories be a lesson and an inspiration to us all. Let's honor their courage, their resilience, their strength, and let's continue their fight for a better world. Like, share, and subscribe. Feel free to comment your thoughts.